And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Valley of the Judged. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have 4 good brothers. Well, technically 3 good brothers and 1 good sister. Oh.
All of us are brothers.
Well, good morning and
armor.
Afternoon, you lovely
arms.
people.
Yep. And in boobs, potentially, too.
Well, remember that another name for Suikoden is all men are brothers.
Yeah.
Another name for Suikoden is the water margin, but we won't get into classic literature, Chinese literature right now.
No. Though I may consider doing read-alongs with some classics, but not any of the 4 pillars of wuxia, because all of them are way too damn long for that kind of thing.
I would do a read-along with Journey to the West.
As a yaoi fangirl, I so consider all men step-brothers.
Down, Riona. Down. It's too early on the stream for that much horny right now.
Yeah. No, I don't think you can bring Riona down. That's just not how it works, it seems.
Then it's gonna be a snuggle.
It's never too early for that much horny.
True.
Monarch, don't encourage her.
Yeah, but but making her return to Valley of the Judged, good sister Riona, and we of course have our man on Thursdays walking with me through Cursebrand Chronicles and walking through our monthly adventures on his channel. Good brother Monarch.
It is so nice to have had a run of games on Valid that have all been good so far.
We have making his debut on the Valley of the Judged, the man who just recently launched his Talks in Library series on YouTube, Good Brother Theo.
Yes. Hello there. I'm Theodore Lucas. How you doing?
And the man of 1,000 runes, the CEO of Zadari Enterprises, and the bane of my fucking existence, Good Brother Xanatrix.
Zadari Enterprises would like to remind you that while mechas are used in war, fans of mecha should never have war. Go look at my tweet thread for more, and if you're still having a fandom war, fuck you, I will find you, and I will make you like mecha. That is not a threat, that is a promise.
Yep, you could always put them in for 1 minute of centrifuge training.
1 minute of centrifuge training followed immediately by a binge watching of everything Gao Gaigar.
I feel bad for any of you if you've never... Consider yourself fortunate if you've never had to be in a centrifuge for even, like, 30 seconds. Or those spinning spaceship rides at some festivals. You know, where you're spinning so hard that you can't get... They don't even need seatbelts on you because you're not moving.
Yeah, the centripetal force keeps you pressed against the walls. Mm-hmm. Most of those rides have rollers on the walls so that they slide up and down as they speed the centrifuge up and down.
Yeah.
It's fun.
It's fun. Trying to get your bearings afterwards isn't fun.
You'll be fine.
Yeah, you'll be fine. I'm sure.
I was the only one in my friend group when we talked ourselves into doing that who didn't lose their lunch afterwards.
Then your friends are weak.
Yeah.
I used to ride that ride repeatedly when I was a child.
So, 13th Age, or as I've called it, the game that actually does what 5th edition promised me over a decade ago. Because now a lot of people have tried to gaslight me into believing that this didn't happen, but when 5th edition of the world's most litigious role-playing game was going through its testing phase, it was known as D&D Next. One of the things that D&D Next tried to foster is that it would be a uniting of the editions. That specific wording was used quite a bit. I know some people are going to act like it never happened. No, it did. I was there for all of it. And I've been very vocal on the fact that while that's a noble goal, you actually have to see that through. And the big criticism I had from day one with 5th edition was that it did not do that. I know some will say, "Oh, but it's a simpler setup." I'm like, that's not the problem. The problem is I was promised a kaboom. There is no earth-shattering kaboom.
Where's the earth-shattering kaboom? There you go. Like Terrible Marvin the Martian.
When it came out, a lot of people were calling it the greatest hits of the editions, and what instantly came to mind for me when I heard that was like a greatest hits album from a particular singer or a particular band, where it's a bunch of different tracks that sometimes are taken out of context. Like a best of album from, say, Rhapsody. Well, nowadays Rhapsody of Fire, but it's gonna feel odd when you're taking songs from a bunch of narrative concept albums.
Yep, they're supposed to be kept in the concept of that album because that's where they make sense.
Mm-hmm. And keep in mind, this was still that particular album was still in the Turilli era, so every album was its own chapter of that story. And the problem is that there were a lot of things that were calling back to previous editions, but it's like whoever was doing the callbacks didn't quite understand why those things were present there. One of the big examples that I always go to is feats. Now I know some will say, but it's easier in 5e than it was in 3e. Technically speaking, that is true. It's also true that it kind of missed the point. Because when feats were introduced back in 3rd, it was an evolution of the proficiency thing that was at the tail end of AD&D, which I always thought was a decent idea that just needed more time to cook. But having feats be an alternate option for the every 4 levels ASI was a dumbass move. Because due to that, the idea of personalizing your character becomes significantly limited. And the fact that there's a bunch of options that are maneuver likes in several builds almost shows that they kind of understood that they screwed the pooch on that. Now, there were 2 games that I had dug into around that time that kind of fulfilled that promise of an edition uniter. One of them was actually my very first review about 9 years ago, called Heroes Against Darkness, a game which to this day is still free. And it specifically lists out what from each edition it's taking. The other major uniter is today's subject matter, 13th Age. Now, 13th Age was the brainchild of Jonathan Tweet, who is the lead designer of D&D 3rd Edition, as well as a bunch of other stuff, including the awesome and now recently getting its due Everway, which I've already covered. I've already talked with him about. And Rob Heinsoe, who is the lead developer for D&D 4th Edition. And 13th Age was meant to be a fusion of the ideas with both, along with a few extra things that it put in. Those of you who followed the channel will know that I've referenced 13th Age a lot when it comes to our guidance problem we have with certain games and the importance of the way 13th Age handles it right with the one unique thing. Which, Zan, would you mind giving a refresher on why we keep citing that?
So, with the one unique thing guidance that the 13th Age core book gives, the one unique thing is something that's supposed to be unique about the character you're creating. It could be a facet of their life, an item, whatever. And it's very obvious that this one unique thing is somewhat of an open blank check, what we've referred to as blank check design in some cases. However, the section about that one unique thing also goes into detail about one unique things that might be too much or too little or just outright impossible. It talks about thinking about the consequences of your one unique thing, gives some pretty detailed examples, and really shows, hey, yeah, the one unique thing can be basically anything, but you want it to find that Goldilocks zone of something that is unique and impactful, but not too much or too little. Mm-hmm. And it really gives good bounds about that. That's why we love that section in 13th Age. I mean, we love everything about 13th Age, but that's beside the point.
Yeah. And
I'll make a note. It's something like, it's not a kind of mechanic I've come across in games I've actually played, but since starting doing the Valley, that is actually a big problem a lot of games have with that kind of blank check, to where you look at it and I'm like, I don't know what the bounds of what I'm looking at are even supposed to be.
Fate is my whipping boy when it comes to this guidance problem, because Fate Core does not do a good job of elaborating what the boundary is for the different types of aspects. And since aspects is something that's core to its design, this descriptor-based mechanic, that's a problem. Now,
however, we always put Chensha in the bubble, because Chensha, as a Fate-based game, had excellent guidance for its aspects. Mm-hmm. But everybody would already know about that if they had watched our Life Path episode. That was using Chensha's Life Path creation.
Yeah.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug.
although given some of the attitudes of Evil Hat, it probably doesn't come too much of a surprise for me because I don't think they ever fully recovered from the debacle that was Fate of Cthulhu.
Ooh.
Is Monarch Riona, if I say that a game is titled Fate of Cthulhu, given what I've said about the Fate system, what is going to come to mind?
Tentacle groping.
Yeah, pretty much what I had in mind as well.
Well, I mean, obviously the tentacle groping, but that's just given with Cthulhu. As for what to expect from the game, I don't know.
I mean, to me, it just sounds like someone took Call of Cthulhu and put it in Fate, which is missing the goddamn point.
Well,
I don't know nearly enough about Fate to know what to expect out of that.
Hit Cthulhu with your boat.
okay, that one's a little more on point. But point is, it would be reasonable for one to assume, okay, it's going to be doing the kind of stuff that's in Call of Cthulhu, just using the Fate system, because adding Fate into the title for different subject matters is par for the course over the past few years. But instead, they decided to do this weird ass time travel plot in the name of reclaiming the Cthulhu mythos from Lovecraft, which anytime somebody does that, I am completely disgusted.
That's the thing. I think Western creators in general, on across the board, they think they're hot shit. That's the point. That's the point
Oh,
where
right,
that's
oh,
why
on
they're
track
looking
I'm here,
at
so I
something
can't
that is already
face
established. Yeah, but that's the thing. They look at shit that is already established, and they say, "I can make it better." No, you can't. You're a talentless piece of shit. You cannot.
And that I remember when with some of the stuff that's come afterwards, it's just been completely unappealing. And obviously there's been some flack over the Tomb Raider RPG that they are doing, and I keep telling people, skip that shit. Get the free one that was actually made by someone at Crystal Dynamics, and I have to thank Brother Hunter for hosting that, because the original link is dead. But getting back on the rails, there's a lot to like when it comes to 13th Age, whether it's the class design, whether it's going with the icon system instead of going with alignments. So it's more about how the movers and shakers of the setting like you or don't care for you, or are conflicted. The escalation die, which ends up allowing for a bit more motion when it comes to combat, and actually makes the first few turns very important depending on your builds. Along with plenty of other options. I did a review of 13th Age and its expansion 13 True Ways not too long ago. I've also made it clear that 13th Age is probably one of the best designed bards that I've seen in fantasy games. Because instead of waffling about with the whole half-caster thing, well, it has its own identity. Then again, even with casters, they're doing one thing that I will always appreciate: not doing the Vancian model. Fuck the Vancian model.
The Vancian model only really works in one place, and it's not even in
I do like
Vance's
how
work.
mechanics are shaped around classes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
But
Vance's system only ever worked in Discworld, and only with Rincewind.
But about a year ago, give or take a few months, there was talk about doing a refined version called a Escalation Edition, which was meant to be kind of cleaning up and getting rid of some of the vestiges from the early design. Not a full on revamp, but something akin to what Pathfinder Second Edition is doing, which will come out very soon. And admittedly, part of the reason they're doing that is to divest themselves of the OGL. But everybody's divesting themselves of the OGL. Even Kobold Press has divested themselves of that, which I didn't see coming. I figured they would stick with it since it's their wheelhouse. But I've already talked about why, and it is heartwarming to see that a lot of people who were stuck in that particular rut are moving elsewhere, even though certain people, including one excommunicated person, would argue otherwise. But that's fine. It's a free country. He is free to be wrong. In his ivory tower.
Now he knows who he is, Monk. Good job.
I'll explain that particular thing later when we're off air. But at some point,
I was just gonna say, let's just put it this way. It's funny because it's true.
Truth is the greatest comedy. But at some point, that Escalation Edition evolved into a second edition, a full-on second edition that is mostly going to be cleanup and is going to be somewhat compatible with the third-party stuff that's already out for 13th Age. Because while there isn't a D&D level amount of third-party material, there's quite a bit of stuff out there, and as far as the open license issue, they already have that covered because they've had their own version of the OGL with the Archmage engine for quite a while. But now originally I was holding off on this because I wanted to see the beta playtest documents and see if I'd cover that or cover the preview PDF. The beta document is 470 pages long. No.
Oof.
I mean, I'm glad that it's that amount for people who want to do beta testing, but that doesn't work for this format. Also, you know how I've bitched about how, say, D&D and other games can't seem to figure out what their setting is? 13th Age doesn't have that problem.
Pardon?
Gesundheit. It has a setting, the Dragon Empire.
Yep, it decided this is our setting, and that's a good thing.
Now, if you want to run it in other settings, you can do that, but it's important to have that. It's important to have that foundation, in order to give guidance in case people want to veer off the beaten path, instead of just saying, "Oh, I trust that people will figure it out on their own." Fabula.
We will never not. Need I remind the monastery and all of our wonderful followers in the temple that Monk and I are exceptionally petty, hold grudges, and will always remind you of it.
Also, hello there, Rel. I'm not saying that every game needs to have a setting, but you need to, you need to shit or get off the pot whether you are trying to go for something specific or trying to go universalist. This idea, the reason why I keep picking on the world's most litigious role-playing game for this kind of thing is it has had a bad habit for the longest time of not nailing down what type of fantasy it wants to be. I know some people will waffle about certain editions leaning towards sword and sorcery or not, but it doesn't say it. And you know how it goes. If you roll off the table, it doesn't count.
Even a blank page has borders.
Yep.
That's actually a perfect way to put it. Even a blank page has borders. That's fantastic.
And
thank you, Riona.
If you're not doing that, then you should be designing around being more universalist. 13th Age doesn't have a setting. It has some setting primers in the adventure guide, but that's a separate thing. But it is building around the assumption that you're going to be building your own setting, and things like the campaign options are to reflect that. And obviously, you've got more universalist stuff like your GURPS, your hero, your Savage Worlds, and all of that. But it's a case where you can't do both. And fantasy is a very wide net. So whenever somebody says that the world's most litigious role-playing game can handle all kinds of fantasy, I'm like, fantasy does not begin and end with Tolkien, motherfucker. Because that's what you're pushing when you end up making that kind of claim. Because if I wanted to use that system to run say a samurai tragedy kind of campaign, I'd have to do a shitload of house rules.
From what I read, at least in the older 13th Age books, it seemed to really reward well-prepared GMs who love making their own settings as well, less so with the icon system.
Pretty much, though. It can account for beer and pretzels as well. Now, the document that we're going to be going over is the 13-page preview doc. Ha! I feel like it's 13 pages on purpose.
Considering that the last 4 pages are just art images and cover images, Monk, I think so too.
Mm-hmm. And there's also the fact that you'll see the number 13 be recurrent in a lot of aspects.
Yeah. Monk, before we go further, I do want to make one aside comment to everyone watching and everyone else. Go to Humble Bundle. They're doing a Cypher System bundle sale. That is all. Cypher System is another system we really love.
Yeah.
The last page was lost in the Age of Fire.
Well, in universe, the reason for the emphasis on 13 ages is it is going with this idea of different ages throughout its settings history. Within each, a certain icon has emerged as a dominant force. But opening up, obviously noting that the design is by Heinso and Tweed and art by Lee Moyer and Aaron McConnell, who are the original 4 people. Something I find amusing as a bit of an aside. There's plenty of times within the original game that Heinso and Tweet would put in these sidebars regarding the method to the madness, and sometimes they wouldn't agree with each other on things.
Of course they wouldn't.
But it opens, what if you could play a tabletop role-playing game with familiar rules in a familiar setting, but imagine if the storytelling and dice rolling action were ramped up beyond what you're used to. That's 13th Age. The 2 of us were lead designers of 2 editions of D&D, and when we designed 13th Age, we did it for ourselves and for gamers like us, not for corporate shareholders. Then we have 13th Age, the cool parts only TTRPG. Story, role-playing games foster imagination and creativity like nothing else. And at 13th Age, we lean into this unique strength. Game masters get a familiar feeling world designed to be customized for each campaign. Players get special rules providing them with narrative authority that draws on their creativity. Crunch. Tabletop role-playing games also have a tactical element in which you make tricky decisions and hope for a good dice rolls. 13th Age leans into the action by presenting players with battles where they have clear tactical decisions to make and dice rolls really matter, while simplifying the ticky-tacky rules for distance and movement that aren't as much fun. And story plus crunch.
Gets rid of the simulationist components that we saw in the world's most litigious RPG.
Mm-hmm. So is 13th Age a wide-open story game with an amazing combat system, or is it a high-powered adventure game with a great system for supporting stories? Yes.
Our favorite answer, Monk.
Yes.
Now, some of the stuff that it goes into afterwards is more for people just coming into it. Like it's going into character classes and how each class plays differently from each other. This is very much true. The wizard and the sorcerer are a very good example of this. There is no universal spell list, but at the same time, individual spells between casting classes and even semi-casting classes do not work the same. The spell casting mechanics for the sorcerer do not work the same as the wizard. Sorcerers have to do a kind of power up for their effects, whereas wizards have a bunch of little options. And of course, the
Henchman.
fighter is not a beat stick. The fighter gets its own set of maneuvers, which I appreciate.
Yep. We like a fighter to actually, be impactful in ways other than meat shield.
Mm-hmm. And just so I am the thing with the wizard, some of the spells have a tag that's known as cyclic. What that means is that when the escalation die is at 0 or odd, then that spell is a once per battle spell. If the die is even, then it isn't. You can still cast it, it's just not expended.
Yep. If you wait for when the escalation die is to your advantage, then well, there are fun things you can do in 13th Age. The escalation die is a wonderful mechanic. I really wish other games had mechanics like it.
Yeah, and as far as what the escalation die is, it is a counting up die that's set up. It's not necessarily rolled, it's more of a track. You're just using a d6 because it goes from 0 to 6. It starts at 0. Every turn afterwards, it goes up by 1, caps at 6, and the current spot that it's on is applied as a bonus to player attacks.
It feels very dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Sorcerers, by contrast, when it comes to their spells, first off, some of their spells are breath weapon spells and have their own setup. And normally it'd be once per battle, but you do have a chance to be able to cast it without expending it. And of course, some spells have the chain effect. So if you cast a spell that has chain, roll a natural even, then you do the chain effect a la Chain Lightning. And this is cumulative. So as long as you keep getting evens and you keep finding targets, you can keep hitting things.
Yep. This actually the whole even odd determination on natural rolls plays into the flexible attack pattern, flexible attack maneuvers in the game as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and leveling is on a range of 1 to 10, which some might say is lame, but what you get between levels is
massive.
Is quite a bit.
It's fucking huge. Holy shit. People, again, we're going to compare to the most litigious game since both these guys designed different editions of the most litigious game, and it is the primary component by which much of the West compares TTRPGs. Really shouldn't, but okay. The complaints of this level feels empty. It doesn't feel like there's anything in it. Will never happen with 13th Age. Mm-hmm. You'll be getting so much shit. You'll be going, I could do all this. I could do all that. I could do this and that. You will never be short of options and you will have plenty of opportunity to creatively think of ways to use all your options and even some of your friends.
Yeah.
It's
Now,
a nice touch since many short games you won't level much.
and it's certainly a nice touch for me as somebody who, when I run a campaign, I want people to go from first to max by the end of it. But since everybody looks at the fighter as the basic bitch, even though it isn't, I will use that as an example. Going from level 1 to level 2. So you're going to get a feat. You're going to get a maneuver. Your hit point multiplier, because it's using multiplier instead of the usual sense, goes from ×3 to ×4. So your starting hit points are 8, your Constitution modifier, and the sum of that multiplied by 3. Going from at level 2, it's the same formula but multiplied by 4, and it goes up by 1 each time. So it's actually more significant than a lot of hit points per level setups.
Yeah, increasing by a multiplicative factor like that is you're quickly going to see your HP become, especially if you're playing something that's that you've designed to be tanky with a higher constitution, to become very, very tanky, very, very fast.
Mm-hmm. In addition, you're getting a boost to initiative, armor class, physical defense, mental defense. Like I said, you're getting quite a bit, especially since a lot of the attacks and maneuvers that you could get are going to scale with level. Which
nothing ever falls off.
Mm-hmm. And this is in addition to the fact that there is a bit of a tier system. Level 1 through 4 is adventurer tier. Levels 5 through 7 are champion tier, and levels 8 through 10 are epic tier. And the biggest thing that this plays a factor in is feats. There is a list of feats in the usual sense, but it's smaller compared to the fact that the majority of feats are enhancements to existing powers, spells, and so on. Usually it'll list whether it's an adventurer, champion, or epic type of feat. And keep in mind, you're getting one every level.
Yep.
And of course, the one unique thing we've already covered.
I actually want to just say here that some of the examples here are really nice that they have, and are. I even see that some of these are some of the ones that they used in the examples and discussing what the impact could be of those examples in the core book. But the listing says, one unique things that players have invented for their heroes include, quote, I'm a dwarf who was born covered in scales from the egg of a dragon, end quote. Quote, I hear pain as music, sweet, sweet music, end quote. And there's the world's most sadistic character. Quote, I am the oldest elf in the world, end quote. Quote, I'm the only escapee from the Diabolist's circus of hell, end quote. Quote, I'm a fallen god forced into mortal form, end quote. That's a bit...
I'm the only human child born to a zombie.
Yes, that one's pretty good. But as for the fallen god one, Monk, slightly coincidental considering last night.
Yeah.
But the big thing here is that these uniques all have great impact to the character, but also can have great impact to the world. Mm-hmm. And that's why in the section about one unique thing in the 13th Age First Edition core book does say you should probably, as you're working with your players and discussing their one unique things, determine exactly how that impacts the game that you're playing. Because, well, there's a lot of things that could go wrong with something too unique.
Yeah. which is why that spread in the first edition core book that goes into the do's and don'ts is so important.
Yep.
All right, I like your concept. There is going to be a lot of Zombusi.
But then it goes into backgrounds, and backgrounds are the game's replacement for skills. And some may cry foul about this, but I'm gonna say something that might get some people really pissed off at me, but I don't give a shit. And I've said this before. D&D does not fit within having a class system, having a skill system. Sorry, a skill system in the sense of other TTRPGs does not fit D&D's sandbox because it was something that was stapled on. And before anyone brings up thief skills, that's their class feature. This is why you've kind of had issues when it comes to like skill point distribution in 3rd edition and Pathfinder, or the fact that in some cases there's too fucking many skills. Don't make me get on the whole how many different knowledge skills do we fucking need?
The answer is yes.
Yes.
The way they handled backgrounds and skills in 13th Age is honestly brilliant and makes so much sense.
Yeah. The central idea with backgrounds is essentially it's a background. And it is somewhat of a blank check. You have a certain number of points to spend on backgrounds, and it applies as a bonus when the GM decides that it applies to the role. And if you're thinking that sounds a bit like the blank check issue we get on about, every class has a short list of suggested backgrounds.
And even in the 2nd edition document here, preview document here, they have some example backgrounds. My favorite being the warrior poet one.
Mm-hmm.
Says, depending on you, this background could represent a refined character analogous to a samurai who composes haiku in the middle of battle. A hard-drinking troublemaker analogous to a Nordic mercenary who ad-libs mocking verses filled with alliteration. I love me some good alliteration.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be something entirely new of your own devising. It's a fairly obvious background for a bard, but it might be more fun for a cleric or sorcerer. Add the detail that you're a warrior poet of the Grey Wardens, and you've... Grey Wardens? Wait, what the fuck? When did this become... What? Wait. When did this become Dragon Age?
Why do I hear Kay sneezing in the background?
And you've added a new organization to the game, warriors associated with the ancient ruins of the High Elves on the shore of the Iron Sea. Will you claim special insight into ancient and possibly not entirely ruined traditions? You should. Are you going to come up with other surprising things the Grey Wardens have been involved in? Very probably. And will the GM eventually entangle you with NPC Grey Wardens in a storyline that makes use of your sword and your poems? Oh yeah.
Drunken Lucha slam poetess who didn't understand that slam poetry doesn't require suplexes.
I love this.
It doesn't?
Also,
Okay.
slam poetry always requires suplexes, especially a snap German back suplex.
Damn, I was scared. I didn't need to do my suplexes in slam poetry anymore. Man, I was about to say like everything is ruined already.
Let me put a terrifying image in your head.
No.
The murder grandpa doing slam poetry.
Monk, doesn't he already?
Doesn't he already?
Doesn't Suzuki already do that?
He is the cutest in the world.
Yep, he won that right.
Which, if you haven't seen that infamous Stardom match with Maki Ito, do that. You will be in stitches, especially if you watch the post-match interview.
The post-match promo made me die and come back and then die again because he really is acting to the second half of his moniker there. He's treating her like a mischievous and disobedient granddaughter.
Mm-hmm. It's just... It's just one that nobody wants to get within arm's length of, because you're going to be screaming in about 5 minutes.
I'm a genetic freak and I'm not normal, but I am the cutest in the world.
That's Steiner, but okay. Oh, but just to go back to the fighter to reference what I mean what I mean here. It outright states possible backgrounds could include Swordmaster, Mercenary Captain, Sea Raider, Shield Wall Spearman, Explorer, Bouncer, Thug, City Guardsman, former Gladiator, former Orc Captive, Bankrupt Nobleman, Duelist, and Goblin Hunter.
Don't you mean Goblin Slayer? That joke had to be made.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
But every single class has that short list of backgrounds, because there is very much the assumption that you're not going to be taking all of your starting points into one background. In fact, you kind of can't.
Don't worry, that's a good thing. You want the variety.
Mm-hmm. Which, whenever this is kind of thing is brought up, I always invoke I use Conan as the main example, but a lot of pulp heroes could qualify. Everybody only knows Conan as a barbarian. Those who have read the books know that he's been a lot more than that in his life.
There's been a lot of things. And it's also why most of us don't call him Conan the Barbarian. We call him Conan the Cimmerian.
Mm-hmm. But he's been a pirate. He's been a thief. He's even been a king.
Ah, yes, Conan the Conqueror.
Mm-hmm. But see, then it gets to combat. The next thing that's mentioned is the escalation die, and as said, it keeps going up until it reaches 6. So after a few rounds, every character is getting a +6 bonus to their attacks,
which is nice. And this is precisely why the die is escalating.
Yeah, and one of the Kickstarter rewards is a red D6, and it even states here, Rob has a ginormous D6 that we use for our escalation die.
Keeps things short and mitigates cursed luck nights.
Mm-hmm.
Can mitigate things, yeah. But as we also detailed earlier, the escalation die isn't just to give you your bonus to attack. There are plenty of effects on all of the classes that will change or be modified or even, upgraded by what's currently on the escalation die. It is such a central mechanic to combat that it's really fun to have too, because not only does the escalation die speed up the combat you're in, but it really does escalate the mood of the players at the table. When die go up and they know they can do real cool shit, people get excited.
Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned, the position of the escalation die can play a factor in some people's kit.
Mm-hmm.
Just as an example, one of the talents that the fighter can get is counterattack. Once per round, when the escalation die is even and the enemy misses you with a natural odd, you can make a melee attack that does half damage as a free action. It's a stand, and if you take the adventurer feat for it, instead of doing half damage, you're doing full damage. If you take the champion feat, you can do it once per turn instead of once per round. So in other words, it's once per enemy turn. And the epic feat for it, you can use counterattack when the escalation die is 3 or higher.
Which, yes, as we stated, epic is in the highest levels, but you would expect something like that to be in the highest levels. It's a capstone feat.
Mm-hmm.
the way that the game encourages you to just look at the stuff and go, what do I really want to do with this character? And then just look at how that progression will go and whether that's going to be the ideal you want or not is amazing. I absolutely love everything 13th Age does with basically the entire system.
Mm-hmm.
This Valley of the Judged is much different compared to other Valleys of the Judged. It's more a love letter than anything. We're exploring what second edition is going to do, but second edition is like I said in my
Valley of the
announcement.
Gushing.
Yeah.
Heh.
And
The only one gushing here is you, Riona.
Rel asks, does it get gamey? The whole, would you play defensively until you knew your attack bonus was high enough to do cool things? Not really, because that kind of play defensively until you're at every particular option, you have something cool that you can do. This isn't a case where you're turtling until you can do something cool. That's not how this is working. Although I will note I've always found the gamey or gamist claim in RPG discussion to be kind of silly, because you are still playing a game. Even if some people want to think that you should be doing more role playing vis-a-vis method acting, even though method actors in real life are rare unicorns.
Well, Neff, if I take that book to bed with me, I'm more likely to get laid than even with the Kama Sutra, so of course 13th Age goes to bed.
But then it goes into balance, talking about how the combat system is imbalanced, so using up resources makes a difference in later fights. And this kind of thing, your resource management does apply, and this is where martial characters. Oh, we lost Theo. Sorry about the cutoff.
All of a sudden, we're all missing our heads, except for Monarch.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no. Neff, the pages don't get sticky. It goes to bed, but it goes to bed in a very special place.
Yeah, let me fix this.
See, there's a distinct advantage to staying short.
It's
I get to
shocked
keep
no
my
one
head.
noticed I have head. It's not where they look.
Of course I notice you have a head. How else would I get it? Wait, what? Ah!
It is what everybody wants.
I hope Theo will make it back. Theo has had electrical issues and internet issues in the past. If Theo does not return, it was good having him here as long as he could be.
Mm-hmm.
And we always appreciate that he makes the efforts he does. I feel really bad whenever this sort of thing happens to him.
Yep.
But regarding the game balance, Monk, it talks about how the resources that you gain from a long rest have to last you through 4 average fights or 3 tough fights or some equivalent combination of battles. So they very much had a gameplay loop in mind that this resource management would be ideal for. Now, we are not talking resource management like counting every fucking arrow, every foot of rope, and every goddamn torch you have. We're talking about your HP, all of these things that are very vital to how combat works. Those resources.
Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to monsters, this isn't one of those situations where the way monsters are designed and the way PCs are designed are the same setup. Truth be told, I've never been a fan of that, and I've made clear that I'm not a fan of that. but obviously lower ones are mooks, and the and it is basically your mobs, your trash mobs, except the way one of the rules that's mentioned that is important is excess damage against one mook spills over into the next mook, which
Yep.
is really great because the reason to use mooks in a combat encounter is to simulate, say, the cannon fodder that heroes are just plowing through in a lot of games, movies, etc.
For those of you who like this particular meme, it's the Worf effect in reverse.
Some of them have have triggered attacks, which is a good way to introduce variety while also not overwhelming.
Yeah. And this ties into the whole determining whether a natural roll is even or odd again. That's a big thing that's all over 13th Age. They really like to do that for the flexible attack structure.
Mm-hmm.
The example given here is that when a Hellhound uses its bite attack, even if they miss but they roll an even, they can follow up with their fiery breath,
Mm-hmm.
which is, and so if it happens on evens, then it's going to happen roughly, looking at the curve, 50% of the time.
Mm-hmm. And when it gets into storytelling, it kind of touches on some of the things we've mentioned. The fact that 13th Age is set in the Dragon Empire, a empire that's risen and fallen several times over the years.
Before we get too far into storytelling, Monk, there's one important thing I think that we should point out in the combat and monsters section.
What?
The section that says spoiling the hero's fun,
Mm-hmm.
where they say they've reworked monster attacks that would usually just completely shut a character down, because a hero not being able to do anything in a combat round sucks. It's fucking stupid. People start getting really upset when their character can do 0 in a round.
Even more so if they get stun locked.
Yeah. And so the example they give is a ghoul in 13th Age can paralyze people, but every round the character has a 50% chance of save against that paralyzation to come out.
Mm-hmm. And at the very least, if you still end up failing the roll after that, then you can chalk it up to one of our mantras. The dice gods show no mercy. Amen.
Amen.
But then when it comes, but the bigger thing within the storytelling section is the icons. This is a concept I talked about before. There are a set of icons who are kind of the movers and shakers within the setting.
Mm-hmm.
And none of them are given names, but they are given titles.
Yeah, I actually have the 13th Age core book open right now. The icons, as per Chapter 1 of the 13th Age First Edition core book, their titles are the Archmage, the Crusader, the Diabolist, the Dwarf King, the Elf Queen, the Emperor, the Great Gold Worm, the High Druid, the Lich King, the Orc Lord, the Priestess, the Prince of Shadows, and the Three.
Mm-hmm.
And players have a positive or negative relationship with them.
Positive,
Yes.
negative, or conflicted.
Yes. And for those of you who might be too young or just didn't play the earliest editions of the world's most litigious RPG, alignment did not used to be a personality trait.
Or
Alignment.
a morality system.
Or a morality system, yes. Alignment used to be your particular relationships to the aspects of the gods. Whether you had a positive or negative relationship with the good gods, or the evil gods, or the chaotic gods, or the lawful gods. And it wasn't meant to guide your morality. It was more meant to guide your interactions with, well, the deities.
The closest analog is the two major factions that are present in every iteration of core Shin Megami Tensei. The Gaia cult and the Messianic cult. Both of them being representations of the law and chaos alignments within Megaten. And of course there's the neutral end, and it's usually the best ending in a lot of Megaten games is rejecting both.
We went over it in pretty big detail when we did the building our own persona game, but rejecting the path and forging your own tends to be a common and recurring theme in Megaten, which not surprising.
Yeah. Now that being said,
Fuck everyone, especially my friends.
Is that an offer or a promise?
Yeah. Now that being said, at character creation you have a certain number of points to spend on alignments, and those points are used to determine how many die you roll if you want to try and get a favor from an icon. And it's usually a case of you get it or you get it but. And having those points doesn't mean you are known on a first name basis with those icons, because the icon system is also meant to represent the organizations and factions that they embody. For example, the Emperor represents the Dragon Empire, and that follows through with any agents or representatives, whether it be nobles, whether it be guards, whether it be knights that are sworn to him. And
BRB gonna go join the army of the undead with the Lich King. What do you mean this is the wrong Lich King?
And also,
you could do some tasks and get a little bit of reputation with the local fertility goddess cult, but you won't meet the high priestess right away.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much. And I do want to point out the conversational style section here. We wrote 13th Age for gamers like us, and in the pages of the rulebook we speak directly to you. We tell you why we wrote certain rules and how you can best use them to create the experience you want to see at the table. We each bring a different personal style to the game, and these differences give us a lot to talk about. One of us, for example, likes to design rules that protect players from suffering too much, while the other likes to create opportunities to narrowly escape serious suffering or heroically rise above it. We often provide options for which rules to use or how to use them. The two of us don't run 13th Age the same way, and you won't play it the same way either of us do. When it comes to how you and your friends play 13th Age at the table, we value personalization over consistency.
So I'm going to make a caveat here, especially to anyone who watched The Valley last night and knew that I said consistency is key to making a good game. What they're talking about here for consistency is not consistency of mechanics, because the mechanics are extremely consistent in 13th Age. They're very consistent. They're talking about consistency of roleplay and of story, and they're exactly right there. You want to have your style and the style of your party and your play group reflected at your table, rather than Rob or Jonathan's styles. And that's why they're like, we talked to you about how we do this, but we know that you won't do it like we do it, so do it the way you want to do it.
I'm suddenly reminded of that whole no Mercer sign incident. Oh,
absolutely no Critical Role, absolutely no Matt Mercer.
And that was just because I've got nothing against him. I was just getting sick of people bringing him up when talking about my GMing style.
Yeah, but Mercer doesn't do it this way on Critical Role, and that's because Mercer is a different GM.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not Mercer. I'm Mildra.
There's a lot to be said for variety of viewpoint, even with Tweet and Heinso giving theirs. They understand that that's only going to be the starting point for most people. Most people are going.
I've often said no one plays Uno as written.
I mean, that's 100% true considering the whole draw 2, draw 4 card stuff. That is not in the original Uno rules, and Uno said so on Twitter, and then got fucking ass blasted by the entire internet.
Mm-hmm.
But variety of viewpoint, variety of play style is one of the greatest things about TTRPGs in general. And the fact that 13th Age just dives into that is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. They clearly knew that they wanted a game that anybody could enjoy. And like we say, there's a game for everyone out there, but not every game is for everyone.
Look, use of a live gun is valid strategy for Uno. It never said you know what.
Yeah. But all that was set up because now we get to their plans for this second edition. Saying, 11 years ago, many innovations in 13th Age were experiments. We had decades of experience playing, running, and designing D&D and other TTRPGs, but 13th Age was brand new. Over the years, we've seen how our experiments worked at tables all over the world and have gained more experience working on 13th Age books, especially the monumental 13th Age Glorantha. Glorantha, if any of you are not familiar, is the core setting for the venerable and very, very good RuneQuest series of games. RuneQuest is a very interesting beast that I hope to tackle sometime in the future in one form or another. But that's beyond the scope of this. I'm just gonna say Stafford was a fucking genius. Even his peers will tell you that. But he goes, now we've used our years of experience and feedback from countless players to make 13th Age more 13th Age-y than ever.
13th Age-y. I knew they were going to pull like that.
That's not just feedback on the first edition, by the way. We're also working off feedback on the alpha playtest draft of 2e from nearly 200 gaming groups. The playtest package you'll get access to by backing the Kickstarter, or by already being in the alpha playtest or accepted into the playtest list, is the second packet, which incorporates the valuable feedback we got during the first round. Now, the next thing that they note is that it's going to be 2 books instead of 1, which honestly was one of the criticisms I had with the core book, that it really should have been split.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I said at the time, I said if you're going to jump into it, try and jump into it with a package deal of getting the core book and 13 True Ways.
Yep.
I dig the honesty too. Shows a lot of planning.
Mm-hmm. But the player's handbook is going to be about 240 pages, maybe more depending on layout. Then the Game Master's Guide will be 160 plus pages for campaign advice, running the game, monsters, setting material for the Dragon Empire, treasure, and an introductory adventure. The Kickstarter will have the 2 books together in a slipcover. There's also going to be a Game Master's screen with a silhouette style with art created by Lee Moyer. And as far as the team, obviously game design and writing is still Heinso and Tweet. Moyer and McConnell are the principal artists. And it sounds like there's going to be a bunch of new art. There's probably going to be a few pieces of art that are reused, but probably not as much.
Well, they're talking about it's a bunch of artists that have contributed to 13th Age over the past few years, and they name people like Simone Banach Trisha DeFogi and Jen McCleary.
Mm-hmm. The Trisha DeFoggy is still editing, and Jen McCleary from Fall of Delta Green fame will be bringing things together. But the first thing that they note as far as changes is revisiting the classes. The original 9 classes are now better balanced than before. Classes that were a little too good, particularly spellcasters, have been dialed down a little. I can hear the reeing in the distance.
But martial characters aren't supposed to be as powerful as spellcasters. Hey, anyone saying this that I can hear? Yes, I can hear you. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, we've had to deal with that kind of thing for years, and it's always stupid.
We're going.
If I recall right from what I read, some people had issues with the old occultist.
The occultist is a special case. It was a weird class. I will leave it at that for now because because what made it weird was its randomization system, which was not very conducive depending on your format. I'll put it that way.
And to once again shit on anyone who shits on martial characters, I'm going to go point to Conan again because he's such a good example. Conan is purely martial. He doesn't have a magical bone in his body. He in fact distrusts magic, well, which is smart. It's very smart. It's very, very smart. And has taken down big bad magic casters more than once. So fuck you if you think that martial characters can't be as powerful and as cool as magical characters.
And
eat shit.
I know some may argue that Conan's some special exception, but as we talked about in some of our martial-focused episodes of Geek Watch,
I not have spells, but I am never out of dumbbells.
Exactly.
Imagine the following scenario: somebody watches say Conan or the Banderas Zorro movies or whatnot, and when they get the chance to make their own character because they're a fan of those movies, they make an XP of that. How deflating is it going to feel for them if all of the work they put into on maneuvers, on parries, on ripostes, on footwork, on economy of motion, all of the stuff that a proper fencer is going to have, is reduced to just basic attack roll?
Yeah, it's not going to be fun.
And then you've got the caster who's doing all sorts of different shit.
Yep. One of our primary criticisms of casters in the most litigious game is that casters interact with the system more than other characters. Mm-hmm. And that's a bad thing because that leads to centralization and not necessarily centralization of mechanics, but you begin centralizing all of the important things on a few people rather than the whole party. That's never fun.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But
plus, in a living world, every person training in art would be aware and try to prepare for meeting someone of a different way of doing combat.
Mm-hmm. But
okay, I have to read this one out. I cast upon thee gym leg day weakness.
But pretty sure that's been Coops' build for the last few months.
Man, too bad he's not here to actually roast directly.
But it goes, in general, classes have more options. Powers and spells that were boring or that hardly anyone chose for their character have been replaced with versions players will find as worthwhile as the powers and spells that have always been strong. And yeah, there were some effects that didn't get taken because it was just too situational or whatnot. Then we have spells at each level. Spellcasters now cast all their spells at their level, so you never have to prep subpar spells. We've taken a close look at damage progression for spells to make sure that they're balanced against each other and against the attacks of non-spellcasting classes. The spells that needed help got the help that they needed.
Always a good thing to see.
And we have go ahead.
Now, I can once again foresee the constant whiners in their eternal petulance going, but that flattens their ability to be awesome. No. It doesn't flatten anything. It brings the floor up. It doesn't bring the ceiling down, you fucking tards.
Remember, Brawl Plus.
Brawl Plus versus Brawl Minus.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Brawl Minus solution. If you're all broken, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
well, actually, Brawl Minus is more our solution.
people still have a fondness for Street Fighter Rainbow Edition.
Yep.
Even though it is completely fucking busted.
Yep. If you bring the floor up so that everything is much more powerful, it's always fun.
Mm-hmm. But we have the fighter is in control. Speaking of experiments in 1E that didn't pan out as we envisioned, the fighter's varied attacks are now under the player's control rather than triggering randomly based on attack rolls. In fact, all the weapon-using classes are stronger at Epic Tier because Epic Tier basic attacks have been improved, allowing them to keep up with monsters' hit point curve and spellcasters' damage curve.
Are they saying that they made variable attacks even better?
Rip Squidam Fighter.
Yeah, originally the variable attacks that fighters had access would trigger based on the die roll.
Even or odd.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it would be natural, even or odd. Sometimes it would be based on a certain threshold, like say second shot triggers on rolls of 16 or higher. But it sounds like they want things to be a bit more in control. And yes, damage does scale. But I think the approach that they're doing is that they felt that the scaling as it currently wasn't enough for them. And it looks like they intend on amending that, which I'm perfectly fine with. Let me especially
I place stab this fucker face down and end my turn.
we're not covering perfect draw. That we covered card game shit the other week. But and they go, the bard we wanted to play. As a class with spells, weaponry, and charm, the bard has been hard to get right for decades. Our new version plays up the bard's trickery and flexibility, providing a lot of options for the player who likes messing with enemies and helping friends. And it's built around music. They plan on improving the bard, which is saying something because I loved the bard in 13th Age as it was.
Yep.
But they give an example of bard talents, and I should note, even before the feats and all that, a lot of classes have a set of talents that they pick right out of the gate that I would actually say is analogous to what perks used to operate under in like Modern Warfare 2.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where your choice of perks was far more of a reflection of your playstyle. You're going to be using LMGs. You're probably going to want Scavenger, so you can get more bullets from pickups. You're picking some sort of hit and runner. You're probably going to want stuff that's leaning towards SMGs. You want to be an asshole? Pick Martyrdom. Everybody hates Martyrdom. Well, that and Last Stand, but Last Stand just meant you were a dick. Whereas, for those who don't recall, Martyrdom had it that when you die, you drop a lit grenade. You drop a lit grenade where you die.
Yep. A grenade that goes off right when the guy thinks he's killed you and is running past your corpse.
Mm-hmm.
So wild question here, but hear me out. In
Oh.
theory, given how magic items can word off words and phrases, can I make a bard that is a magical girl transformation included?
Yes.
You absolutely can. I'm sure somebody's already done it.
I'm sure someone's already done it. And if somebody really wanted to go full magical girl, I'd probably say you'd be better served with Magi Knights, but that's just me.
Yes, we also have to shill for our friends.
Mhm.
Remember, everybody, I shameless plug everyone whenever I can. Also, Veil of the Void from Trevor, Heavens and Heresies from the other Trevor.
Mhm.
I could keep naming names, but get these games.
Yeah. And of course, I will note this. I am in the middle of developing some third-party support for Magi Knights. You should. It's currently being worked on.
I have been there for those discussions.
Mm-hmm. It started as homebrews, but since they're encouraging people to put out third-party stuff, I'm following suit with some of my ideas, including one that was a bit more radical, but one that I felt needed to be done to fill a niche.
Yep.
But each bardic talent, going back to it, represents a method of playing music or performing magic. You don't have to be using or even carrying the instrument you've gained music from. Once you've learned its magic, you can access the magic using any instrument, song, or wand. That is important, so they dodge the whole "does the bard need to have a musical instrument?" kind of thing. And the example they give is brass, horns, and trumpets. Your favorite magic relies on piercing tones from horns, war horns, trumpets, flugelhorns, and other metallic instruments powered by your own breath. Trombones and tubas are a bit anachronistic for a high medieval world, but most versions of the Dragon Empire are high magic worlds, and we're sure you can find wonderful medieval horns to upgun if you care. Like other bardic talents,
The power of horny.
You knew she was going to make that joke, Monk. Come on now.
Bardic talents, brass provides a combat riff, healing magic, and a miss me effect, and a keynote. Range. Note that spells that are part of brass all target nearby or far away targets because of the brass keynote, piercing tones. Adventurer feat. You gain all benefits listed as brass adventurer feats for trumpet call, brassy, you get the horns, and piercing tones. Champion feat, ditto, but for the champion tier feats. Epic feat, ditto, but for the epic feats. And this is where I will mention one house rule that I do. They have it that that adventure, champion, and epic is a 3 feat chain. I don't. Adventure, champion, and epic are just feat slots. Is one of my house rules. And some may say that's going to result in some ridiculous shit. Yes, it is.
For those of you who haven't, or for those of you who have been living under a rock, first of all, you're all now named Wukong. Nice to meet you. Second of all, whenever we've talked about Final Fantasy TRPG Legend Edition, we have explicitly said that we know that the combinations of feats, spells, jobs, classes, the way our customization engine works is going to result in some ridiculous shit. And our answer is fine. The more chaos, the more glorious.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least my answer's that way.
Yep.
His is just, lots of customization. Good.
So
Good stuff.
next they talk about revisiting the kin. Kin is the reflavored version of race for this. I'm certainly finer with kin than I am with ancestry.
Nope. You
It's
want me to
kin
take
enough.
this page?
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
kin enough.
Dwarves, gnomes, humans, and other sorts of characters are now referred to as kin, and each kin has multiple kin powers for you to choose from. That's an important thing to note because originally every race had only one racial power, and in this case, it's looking like there's several, but you've got to pick one. And some of them have been refined. Like lethal works for any attack, not just melee attacks. So if you want to be a half
Like
orc,
humans had tenacity.
so if you want to be a half orc spellcaster, well, now you can. And speaking of which, every character gets to distribute ability scores as they please. I'm hoping that they don't do the no double up kind of thing, because when D&D 5e decided that they were going to do that whole stunt of we're getting rid of racial ability score mods and penalties, and just say oh pick one. I was like, you guys think that you did some massive innovation with this, but you really didn't. Because with 13th Age, you could get a +2 into one of two scores, and you could get from both race and from class. The only rule was you couldn't pick the same ability twice.
Yep.
But
They mention here that the original kin power for wood elves was broken,
yeah,
and
let me dig that one up just
no,
to.
I already have it. I already have it open. The original Elven Grace. At the start of each of your turns, roll a die to see if you get an extra standard action. If your roll is equal to or lower than the escalation die, you get an extra standard action that turn. At the start of the battle, you roll a d6. Each time you successfully gain an extra action, the size of the die you roll increases by 1, following the progression d6, d8, d10, d12, d20. If you get an extra action after rolling a d20, you can't get any more extra actions that battle, and then it had a champion feat added to it. Once per day, started battle rolling a d4 for Elven Grace instead of a d6.
That's still the possibility of a character getting a bunch of extra actions.
Yep. And they changed that kin power to, at the start of each of your turns, roll 1d8 to see if you get an extra standard action. If your roll is equal to or lower than the escalation die, you get an extra standard action that turn. You then stop rolling for Elven Grace until you've taken a quick rest. Alternatively, you can opt not to take the extra action and keep rolling each turn. And then it says, for the Champion Feat Edition, once per arc, roll a d4 for Elven Grace instead of a d8. If you don't get an extra action, this option is not expended.
Yeah. Arc is meant to be the length of time between two full heal-ups. And I actually prefer that because when you put in things like day or specific time measures like that, people get hung up on that.
Yep.
This is the reason why in, say, World of Darkness, I like that a lot of abilities last until the end of the scene.
Mm-hmm.
How long a scene is not going to be set in stone.
It is usually, but not always, until you change locations. Because that's usually how a scene works in, say, stage work on the actual stage, not just movies, but like I'm talking Broadway here, baby.
But if you pick Wood Elves for 2nd edition, you choose between either Elven Grace, Fortunate Fae, or Queen's Eye. Fortunate Fae, 3 times per arc, but never more than twice per battle. You can re-roll a d20 that is not an attack roll or an initiative roll and has not already been re-rolled. You must abide by the re-roll and can't do it again or benefit from any other tricky methods of replacing the re-roll. The Champion Feat grants its use 5 times per arc. And Queen's Eye, once per battle when the escalation die is 2 or higher, turn your miss with a ranged attack into a hit. One Champion Feat, once per arc, instead of turning a miss from a ranged attack into a hit, you can turn a hit from a ranged attack into a critical. I think the only thing I'd house rule with Queen's Eye is that it's not limited to ranged attacks.
Yeah, I would house rule that it's any of your standard attacks.
Hmm. Then we have explaining icon connections. The rules for icon connections and how players use them in-game have been significantly revamped based on the feedback we've heard since the game's release. We believe the new, more player-facing rules will be much easier to understand and use in fun and creative ways. Because this rule system is unique to 13th Age, we spent a lot of time spelling out how to use icon connections with copious examples, including many from players and GMs who shared their favorite icon connections experiences with us. That's actually good because the rules for how icon connections could work, there wasn't a whole lot of examples in the original core book. So I'm glad that they are addressing that. And plus it's further guidance, which we love.
Yeah, they still had some good guidance for icon connections back in the core rulebook, but it's understandable that they had less then than they do now because they had done less playtesting back then.
Mm-hmm.
Now they don't even just have playtesting; they have thousands upon thousands of 13th Age games played by people the world over.
Mm-hmm.
So more data equals more nuance. More nuance, I think, is the best way to put that.
Mm-hmm.
More data equals more nuance.
Yeah, each icon gets a fuller treatment, including possible ideas for organizations that might support or oppose each of them. Since the icons operate off-stage, ground-level organizations of your own choosing make a great way to connect heroes to the icon's goals and activities. Players now roll to find out if there's a twist with their icon connection after describing what they want from the connection. This means each of our icon connection examples comes with one or more ideas for interesting twists that preserve the player's intent while making the story more interesting in ways they might not have chosen. And we have an example from the Icon Connections chapter describing how a player uses their connection by telling a story about something that's going to happen in the future, one of our categories of effect. The results of this connection won't entirely play out until later, but the player should at least get what they asked for. Then it goes future.
Reminds me a lot of how things were in Tyranny, and it's a great thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Tyranny is a very interesting beast, especially since there aren't many Bronze Age style fantasy affairs, even though magic in Tyranny is fucking busted.
Monk, I blame you and Matt for this, but when you mentioned icons getting organizations, it immediately went, oh god, Organization 13 all over again.
I regret nothing. The end. But possible or conflicted Emperor, active hero, connection expressed as future story. Your Imperial Paladin has just used merciful logic and a difficult diplomacy skill check to prevent the people of a frontier village from hanging the two bedraggled bandits they caught during a blizzard. You decide to use your connection with the Emperor to turn this event into a definitive scene in the life of this community, promoting loyalty to the Emperor that will last for a generation. Locking in a social victory is a great use for an icon connection, and this frontier village will probably reappear in future adventures. Maybe it will even rename itself and start a movement that affects other areas of the Empire. Twist. The village becomes known for its leniency, specifically for its shrine of Imperial Absolution. Any outlaw who spends 2 years tending the shrine without getting more than 20 yards from the shrine is forgiven their crimes and may start fresh. Is this a twist, you ask? It becomes one late in the hero's career when one of their committed enemies devotes themselves to caring for the shrine. More prosaically, a straightforward twist would require the heroes to take the bandits to their destination, a 2-year posting to a seawall punishment legion defending against the Iron Sea.
That's the connection between mechanic and narrative. Once again, we have especially lauded that in any game it ever appears in, when they make mechanics and narrative hook into each other and thus give tangible, not just rewards, but tangible impact from players, both mechanically and narratively. Because the players want to feel like they're changing things. They want to be rewarded for it too. Once again, a theory of fun, Monk.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
everybody should read it.
Yep. the big thing here is that, yeah, you just did something that helped two bandits seek out absolution, but now you've also changed an entire village and the way that they mete out judgment and punishment.
I feel like the effort to blend narrative and with it to losing mechanics is one of the best things 13th Age does.
Absolutely, Riona. Absolutely. And this type of impact is tangible. This is something the characters, the players, will see. They'll find that village at some other point, especially if it's something that sticks in their minds. Parties love to go back to places they've been that stick on their mind. And they'll see the changes and they'll go, "Holy shit, we did this." This is one of the best aha moments for parties, whether it's a positive or negative thing they've caused to happen. You either get, "Holy shit, we did this," or you get, "Holy shit, we did this." And the feeling is completely different between the same sets of words, because it's like, "Oh fuck, we did something cool," or "Oh fuck, we ruined everything." So this extensive marrying of mechanics and narrative, going even further beyond what was already there, it really seems like Heinzo and Tweet are just doubling down on everything that makes 13th Age good.
Then we get into campaign decisions. The new edition talks you through the process of deciding which icons predominate in your campaign and how they might differ from how the icons are portrayed in our default campaign setting. In your game, certain icons might be elevated to higher standing, reimagined, downplayed, sidelined, killed off, or merged with other icons. In the original game, the looming threat of the Orc Lord was a shadow upon the Dragon Empire. In the new version, the Orc Lord has been defeated, and it's up to your group to determine how that happened and what the aftermath is. Who killed the Orc Lord? How much of the Dragon Empire did he take down before he died? What new villainous threat rises in his place? We want every campaign to be its own story, so you and your friends answer these questions, not us.
I'm glad that second edition is going to allow for advancement in the history of the Dragon Empire. Because we know games that like to stay in their one little pocket of history for forever with no advancement, don't we, Monk? Don't we know a specific war game in space that has been doing this for fucking 25 years and also shitting all over its player base? Don't we, Games Workshop? Don't we, Warhammer 40K?
You know, anybody who's currently despairing about that, you have two options. You can either sit there and just whine about the state of things, or you can find alternatives. I have. There's a little thing called one-page rules. There's also War Surge, and of course there's the times where the 40K refugees tried out Infinity, which was a learning experience for them.
And then, of course, there's the Geek Watch episode that detailed the largest part of it. BattleTech accepts all. Come along.
Yep. And if you join now, you get a free Irby.
More like they're trying to throw away the Irbies and you get a free Irby.
Hey, don't curb the Irby.
I'm not curbing the herb. Come on now. I'm just saying.
Oh boy, this sinking ship sucks. Better hop in the flaming one.
But even and yes, I'm aware of the issues that are going on with BattleTech, but I'm also aware that the people who are causing those issues don't have as much power as they think they do.
So they took over a wiki and they took over a single Discord. The rest of the fandom is like, fuck you, we still have all these other places, including the Cerna wiki. Eat shit.
You've just got a bunch of people who are jumping in on this who don't know the full picture.
Yeah. As a side note, the wikis for both Warhammer 40K and BattleTech that have been taken over by shitty bad actor community managers are the wikis hosted on fandom.com. The Lexicanum for 40k and the Cernowiki for Battletech are still 100% community fan run. So don't despair. We're still out there.
Mm-hmm. And then we get to Monster-Orama. Everything we got right with monsters for the first time around, we're doing more of with second edition. Overall, monster special attacks and abilities are amped up so that different creatures provide entertainingly diverse combat challenges. The advice for creating your own monsters offers many more examples and better guidelines for how to make troops, casters, blockers, and wreckers different from each other.
And the monsters are even sexier.
This is a chat full of monster fuckers. None of us can deny that.
Mm-hmm. We also added a section on NPCs so that GMs can more easily populate their despicable cults, outlaw bands, and villain strongholds.
I'm taking the next section, Monk.
Yeah, one of the things I do want to point out is the whole troops, casters, blockers, and wreckers. This is something that they inherited from an underrated aspect of D&D 4th edition, which was adding a role system to monster entries. In a lot of monster setups, there's usually just a standard stat block for that given monster. Something that 4th edition tried to do, and probably got shit on for it because people have this idea in their head about how 4th edition worked versus how it actually worked.
Alas, an edition I never got to play because the people around me were shitlords.
What was the fact that, as mentioned, there were different roles. Now, the roles in 4th edition were artillery, brute, controller, lurker, skirmisher, and soldier. Some of them may have a leader keyword, and there is a subtype known as solo. Solos are beefy monsters that are meant to take on entire parties by themselves. Think of like a beholder, for instance.
Yep. But now we get to the section I want to read, because it's part of my shtick here. Dragons. Dragons have gotten more dragony, with their breath weapons taking more of a central role in their attacks. An optional and highly flexible combat trick available to every dragon, see below, offers a new way for them to frustrate or mangle the heroes. Dragons have always been a little too powerful by design, and in 2nd edition, that's for sure. We think of dragons as the monster's equivalent of the player characters. Each dragon has access to one or more flip you tricks. That is some unfortunate self-censorship there. I'm going to say they're fuck you tricks.
Mm-hmm.
And as the GM, you don't have to choose which trick they'll use ahead of time. Will we keep that name? Maybe. But if not, you get to see them before they're renamed. A single fuck you trick lets a dragon use its godlike reflexes to re-roll initiative. Start of combat only. Follow its killer instinct to add +1 to an attack roll after you see the roll. Bring draconic levels of pain and increase its crit range by 2 after you see the roll. Use its wily tail to prevent a hero from making an opportunity attack. Sweep with its wing to force a hero to re-roll a disengage check. Use its magnificent scales to force a hero to re-roll a hit that targets its AC that isn't a critical. Focus its uncanny mind to force a hero to re-roll a hit targeting its magic defense. Unleash its bestial vitality to force a hero to re-roll a hit targeting its physical defense. Use its sheer draconic awesomeness to attempt to throw off one temporary effect, requiring a standard save at a target of 11 plus to do so. So essentially, the dragons are going to fuck you up. They're going to fuck you up.
Good save.
Nice, and notice they are locational and body parts too, accounting for where the party is placed or what damage has been done to it.
Location kind of affects these are just examples that one could easily interpret, but 13th Age doesn't really care about hit locations.
Positioning is a little more theater of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
That was mentioned. Where was that mentioned? It was mentioned back before we got into the changes for second edition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tactical without needing to count squares.
Yeah.
Combatants are relative to each other rather than by where they are on a grid.
Mm-hmm.
Oh right, I forgot the gridless part. Sorry.
It's all good.
Yep.
It's easy to forget that they didn't implement a grid here when you're having too much fun.
Mm-hmm. Oh. And battle design. Balanced battles and adventures are a hallmark of 13th Age, and our new guidelines make it easier for the GM to customize challenging encounters of different difficulty levels. New examples of battleground hazards help give battles unique and memorable features that change the experience of combat. Then we have magic items. Magic weapons have always been a hero's favorite treasure, and now we've made other magic items better. Magic boots add to your initiative rolls as well as disengage checks, and magic shields force enemies to reroll attacks against you. Most importantly, magic item powers related to damage or hit points scale up with your tier. They're not stuck with the effect for the item's tier. This means all magic items have worthwhile powers in the hands of epic tier characters, even adventurer tier items.
Magic weapons that grow with you? Perish the thought.
Mm-mm.
Growth weapons, I'm going to be honest. Growth weapons have been something that I wished way more TTRPGs had in them, because the idea of a hero growing with their weapon has always been a big one in stories.
We kind of have that in Legend Edition with the Crown's Guard job.
Yep.
The only system I've seen actually do that is Weapons of Legacy, which was like a third, or not a third party, but a supplemental thing for third edition.
Oh,
Not the best implemented.
This is another case where I get to bring up 4th edition, because it had...
No longer will I have to discard the legendary Blade of Unmaking because I got it early in the adventure and replaced it with a common garden hoe that is higher level.
Oh,
exactly.
This is a case where I get to bring up something that was in 4th edition, and that was how they handled artifacts. Now, yes, there was the magic items on different slots, and I believe that was in the DM's guide. Let me open that up. So yeah, it was in regards to. I mean, you had the whole thing of treasure parcels for rewards. But let me. The general idea was a certain item would develop more powers as you leveled up, and as you did actions that the artifact liked. The idea with artifacts was that they were somewhat sentient. Oh. And I suppose another example, and depending on how much alignment you had with the item, it could grant certain features. I suppose another example of this kind of thing would be the divine gifts in Anima.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why this kind of thing is interesting to go over here is because of the fact that it helps integrate the magic item into the narrative that's being told. And am I bringing this up solely so I can flex on people who thought that fourth edition didn't have any role playing? Yeah, maybe. Oh. But let me see where. Okay, so it was in the DM's guide. I had to do a bit of checking and double checking because I haven't run a 4E campaign in quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
But let me
I did
okay,
notice that a lot of praise that 13th Age gets tends to be by people who leaked 4th edition too.
So artifacts in 4th edition had a stat called concordance, which was based on the attitude that the artifact had towards you. 0 or less, angered. 1 to 4, unsatisfied. 5 to 11, normal. 12 to 15, satisfied. 16 to 20, pleased. And each of them have each artifact entry has a set of properties that are unique to it, as well as some additional effects depending on the concordance score. Like the Axe of the Dwarfish Lords in the DM's guide starts with a concordance of 5. When you gain a level, it gets 1d10 concordance. If you're a dwarf, it gets 2 concordance. If it completes a quest on behalf of dwarf leaders, 1. If it kills a giant, 1, though once per day. If you attack a dwarf once per encounter, -2. If you disobey a directive from dwarf leaders, -2.
Yep.
And the more it's pleased, the more stuff it's going to be able to do. And I'm just using that as a example because I've often said that with magic items, individual magic items should have some degree of special to them. Like the example that I use as my ideal for what magic items should be.
The Sundari cat blade will appear to hate you the more it likes you.
Noble Phantasms in Fate.
In Fate, as in the Nasuverse games, not the TTRPG we mentioned just at the beginning of all this.
Mm-hmm.
The Fate with all of the gender-bent male historical figures into, well, sexy waifus.
Yeah.
And the same Fate that too many people spend real money on JPEGs for. Just go to the wikis if you want your JPEGs.
Mm-hmm.
I choose to accept the Fate renditions of all those characters as the real versions.
I mean, female Leonardo da Vinci is not only stacked, she's a bro.
But
Bar just is bar best.
Skaha. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to counter with Skaha. She's great, but she was actually female in Irish and Scottish history. So Skaha and Aoife are great.
But the reason why I bring up the Noble Phantasms is something like, say, Excalibur or Gade Bolg is not just a +1 weapon or something like that, but a representation of their myth.
Yes, and a legendary magical item of any sort, something with a storied history and a story behind it, should be in a game of high fantasy, or a game of any fantasy for that matter, somewhat analogous to its actual fantastical story.
And if I have to use one that isn't tied to established myths, consider the Master Sword in the Legend of Zelda games.
The Sword of Evil's Bane.
Mm-hmm.
Also, to anyone who dislikes Skyward Sword because of the controls, fuck you. Replay the HD version and go through the story of how the Master Sword was made. And anyone who says Fi is annoying, I'm going to find you and I'm going to bury you.
Excalibur from Soul Eater, the strongest weapon in the worst but unbearable to be around.
Is this a bad time to mention that Dr. Stein has been in the temple?
Not a bad time, but yeah, a mythical artifact of some sort, whether it's something along the lines of a legendary weapon, like previously mentioned Excalibur and Gable, or other things from Grecian legends, such as the Aegis from Athena or the Golden Fleece from the Argonauts. These things in a fantasy game, in a TTRPG, should be, like as I said, analogous to their myths. They should be powerful, and they should also be hard to find and acquire. That's another thing. Like the +1 magic sword, that all that implies to me is that someone put a little bit of strengthening magic on a normal sword. It's not really an artifact or a relic. It's just an enhanced weapon.
Mm-hmm. And if I have to use an example that isn't magically enhanced, consider the Atlantean sword in the first Conan movie.
Yeah. I mean, we still don't know whether that one was magically enhanced or not. The Atlanteans are kind of weird in Hyperborea.
Well, the bigger thing was that it was clearly made with a type of metal that just is significantly stronger than anything else.
Yeah.
People forgot the Lovecraft roots in Conan.
Well, that's partially because Robert E. Howard and Lovecraft were friends, and would swap notes all the time. Lovecraft actually took it really hard with what happened with Howard, but that's another story. But when it comes to the big thing with the Atlantean sword is not just the makeup of the sword, but also where it is and what's on it. It was in a temple to Crom, and on it is written, "Suffer no guilt, ye who wields this in the name of Crom." Make your Big O jokes. I know you've got them because I think one of the writers of Big O outright said that's what he was referencing.
Cast in the name of God, ye not guilty.
Mm-hmm.
That is my single favorite, just half-sensical line that has ever come up in an anime. It's like, it doesn't really make sense, but it's awesome.
When you know the origin, then it starts making significantly more sense. Especially during that second season where parts of it are utilized, like the whole ye not when it comes to trying to activate Big Fow for the first time,
or the fact that when somebody tried to get in the Big O and it wasn't Roger, it said ye guilty and killed them.
That was Big Duo.
Well, that was Big Duo, but still, when someone tries to get into Megadeus, they don't and they aren't the registered pilot or a registered authorized pilot, they're killed by the Megadeus.
Mm-hmm. But with magic items in 13th Age, it is a bit loose, but there are the equivalent of magic item slots known as chakras. The rule is it's not a case where you can only have one of each. You can have more than what's allowable, but if you do, the magic item is going to have certain quirks. Oh. Zan, you remember how in Numenera, if you had too many ciphers, you could have some interesting things happen to you?
No, Monk, I don't remember that the nanomachines could tear you apart and reconfigure you entirely if you weren't careful. That's not something I'd ever remember about one of my favorite TTRPG systems in the whole wide world.
Oh, but it's in a similar principle, but not as bad.
Yeah.
But then the last thing they go with is the original edition is not obsolete. One of our goals was to make sure that the books we published for the last 11 years, as well as the 13th Age compatible books published by third-party publishers, would be still useful at tables playing 2nd edition. We've managed it. Adventures like Eyes of the Stone Thief, Elven Towers, and Shards of the Broken Sky are perfectly playable using 2E. Source books like Drakkenhall and Book of the Underworld are entirely viable. Many of the playtest campaigns we heard about from the 13th Age 2E Alpha playtest packet included Demonologists from Book of Demons, and Monks, Necromancers, and Commanders from 13 True Ways. There are issues some GMs will want to address with a few of the mechanics in earlier books, which we'll point out in FAQs when we've finished 2E. Our new battle building guidelines will make life harder on large parties, in a good way, and that isn't reflected in earlier adventures battle building advice. But overall, if you've got a 1E book with stuff you like in it, that stuff will still be relevant in 2E. And yes, we'll almost certainly update most of the 13 True Ways classes in a book Rob is working on, which he calls Further Adventures.
No, Further Adventurers.
Further Adventurers, sorry. And then the last few pages are examples
Really-
of what the cover art is going to look like for both books.
Really cool art. I really like the art.
I do like the art has always been on point with 13th Age. I really like the gemstone shield design with the Game Master's Guide.
You and I are looking at the same fucking picture. We're sharing a brain again. Fucking Christ.
Mhm.
Monk and I do this all the time. There's a reason we get along so well and also irk each other so well. We share a brain.
Yeah. Essentially it looks like a triangle gemstone with facets of it showing 4 different icons: the 3, the Crusader, the Lich King, and the Elf Queen.
Yep.
I do remember
Good shit.
in one campaign that I did, I had vastly changed how a lot of the icons had worked, because I wanted to have it that that very few of the icons were outright evil aligned. So for instance, the 3, which is meant to be 3 of the 5 chromatic dragons, with two of them indisposed, the red, the blue, and the black, were not just 3 dragons, but 3 aspects of Tiamat.
Well, I mean, duh.
Well, one particular idea that was put up in 4th edition that I liked is that Bahamut and Tiamat were formed from the corpse of the dragon titan Io. And
EO has been around for a very long time, too.
Mhm. And because of that, I went with the idea that the Great Gold Worm is clearly meant to channel Bahamut,
Even though Bahamut is platinum in most of the stuff that he's portrayed in.
but in all other aspects, it's Bahamut.
Oh, yeah. It's the one good god. Good dragon god.
So I went with this idea of long ago, Bahamut and Tiamat and their affiliate and the metallic and chromatic dragons ended up getting into a fight. Tiamat lost, and Tiamat's soul got split into 5. And those became the Great Chromatic Dragons.
If he wore a Hawaiian shirt and sandals, he'd be Bahamas Mutt.
That was forced. But the green and the white dragon are essentially the mystery box that was set up. And the idea is if they find those 2, then then all 5 of them could fuse, and then Tiamat's back.
This just sounds like a Samurai Jack with extra steps.
I know some might say that doesn't sound like you're turning the dragons into a JRPG final boss, even though you shouldn't be using the term JRPG.
We've been through that.
To that I say yes. problem?
Anytime anyone asks me, aren't you designing a boss that would be in a video game? My answer is yes. And this
Okay.
isn't a video game. I don't care. Shut up.
I've
If
never
you don't like it, get away from my
I've
table.
never understood this insistence on having this segregation of what you can draw from. Or the whole it's too gamey. You're playing a game.
To quote Brother Joel, you make elf games, or in this case, you play elf games.
But now this is currently running on Kickstarter. There's 25 days to go at the time of the stream. They were asking for about £50,000.
Or if you're looking at it in America dollars, 62,619.
Mm-hmm. And they're currently at
4 times that.
Yeah, four. Very, very much so. They're currently at £228,615, or 286,317 real currency. Did I say that out loud?
Monk, you said the quiet part out loud.
Mm-hmm. But within the Kickstarter page, there's little excerpts called "Rob Says." So
oh my god!
So even in this, they're still doing that habit, because within the core book for 13th Age, as mentioned before, there's little asides from either Jonathan or Rob going into the method behind the madness. And there's several of those throughout the Kickstarter page.
Before we start in on those, I just want to note that the reward tiers are named after monsters. And I'm going to read them out. There's, at the bottom, Dire Rat, then Kobold Archer, then Ochre Jelly, then Drider, then Owlbear, then Stone Golem, then Rakshasa, then Iron Golem, then Medusa Noble, Your Unique, which is adding your one unique thing to a list of examples in the player's handbook, interestingly enough.
Mm-hmm.
The Merilith, and the Hungry Maw was an early bird player's handbook, along with the Bulette being an early bird for hardbacks, and Ancient Red Dragon, which is sold out, had all of the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The Hungry Maw was my stripper name.
Not surprising.
Oh. And of course, I do like in the design part for the original team section, they say Rob Heinsohn and Jonathan Tweed haven't been arguing enough in the printed playtest documents yet, but their opinionated sidebars will surface again once it's clear who gets the final word in the rules. And they've already unlocked several stretch goals. A form-fillable character sheet. I'm very grateful for that, because when I do reviews of games, I like to have a character built. For the longest time, I was building random characters, and then once I started getting Art of Aldine, I used her as kind of the mascot, so I didn't have to make a whole new thing every time. I prefer having a form-fillable character sheet because when I show the character sheet in that review, it looks a lot better having that than me having to go in a PDF editor and put in the text myself. I'm still putting in the text myself either way. It's just one form is significantly more manageable.
I would say convenient.
It's a nice
well.
touch.
Yep.
Yep.
They've unlocked ribbon bookmarks in the core books. Always nice.
That's very classy. I like ribbon bookmarks.
Mm-hmm. And printable icon tokens, which is cute. a solo introductory adventure.
And then the next one is important for us, Monk.
Yep. Roll20 virtual tabletop support.
Considering that Cloister has been using Roll20 mostly,
Mhm.
with any system that we can that even has a modicum of fan support on Roll20 for different campaigns. Having Roll20 support for second edition of 13th Age. I mean, 13th Age is already on Roll20,
Mhm.
obviously, but making sure that they also have it for second edition is Kino. It's peak. We love it. We love
Mhm.
to see it.
The next one was desktop wallpapers of the icons,
Nice.
which is cute. Then PC tokens for each kin,
Very cool.
and more monster art in books. Then quick start rules.
The one that we didn't look at because it's 400 some odd pages long.
I'm pretty sure the quick start rules that they'd put out for the final product aren't going to be that big. Nobody makes quick start rules that big because that kind of distracts from it being, a quick start.
A quick start. I mean,
Quick was in quotes.
Well, remember, this is going to be 2 books, and the 2 books combined currently are less than that proto quick start.
Yeah. The only one that's still locked at this time, although let me.
They're so close to it, Monk. They're
Yeah.
They're less than 25,000 pounds away.
Mm-hmm. Is Foundry VTT support. And I know one might say, why was Foundry in a separate thing? Well, Foundry has a significant amount more moving parts than Roll20 does. It's also a completely different program.
Yep, and it's programmed for in a completely different way.
Mm-hmm. Much like how you can't carry code from one programming language into the other.
Oh, you can. It just won't work. If I take the programming language from Python and throw it in C#, you could certainly throw it into you could throw it into Microsoft Visual if you really want to. It's not going to work, but you can do that.
I will note I love the visual of the Game Master screen in the add-ons.
That is such a cool fucking screen.
It is reminiscent of a mixture of stained glass design, even though it's just using gold and black, and pottery art that you would see in ancient Greece.
Yeah, it looks almost. They reversed what part is darkened and what part is lit, but yes, it looks exactly like vase art in ancient Grecian art styles. Mm-hmm. Now, one of my favorite parts of the add-ons, besides the physical stuff like that velvet fucking map, iconic retinue. Choose one of the 12 living icons, or be like that and choose the icon who didn't make it into second edition. You'll appear in the list of that icon's devoted followers in the credits.
Oh.
So while I like that they're making a 13th Age dice set, I hope that they don't make it in this garishly bright yellow. I don't know. Yellow on dice, unless it's a translucent dye or the yellow is not straight yellow for some reason, matte yellow looks on dice.
It's not the worst color setup I've seen for dice. That still goes to the dye that was in those Exalted board games.
Yeah.
Where it was red with a white outline and white numbers.
Yep.
It looked butt ugly. It was about as ugly as going to a hockey game wearing white skates.
And then, of course, they are selling like we talked about earlier. They're selling the 13th Age Giant Escalation die. Now, Giant
Roll the
is
read on red die for extra seriousness, and we'll try and figure out what I was together.
uh, roll the red on red die. Yeah. But the now calling the giant escalation die giant is in, I'm going to put it in quotes because it's 5.7 millimeters cubed, or 57 millimeters cubed, which means 5.7 centimeters cubed, which means it's about 2 inches cubed.
Mm-hmm.
Little over 2 inches cubed, like maybe 2.5 inches cubed. And yeah, that's a big die, but that's not. When I think giant die, I think that like those big baseball or softball sized novelty dice. Is that just me?
Yeah, I can understand that. And while I've used those die as improvised baseballs in the past.
Heh.
Mostly because anytime I use a wiffle ball, I always use it so it does those ridiculous curves.
Yeah.
So you can't hit it.
Steel rules.
Oh, especially since we all know that one guy who, no matter what, always insists that the pitch was a ball, not a strike.
I mean, the umpire would know better, but okay.
I've had some incidents in batting cages.
Yeah, I know.
Especially with that one person who keeps insisting, give me fastballs, and I'm like, fuck you, you're getting sliders.
Heh.
You asked me for that again, and I'm going for a fastball that's really, really high up. Though I always feel bad for catchers whenever a swing is done and it dings, because I've seen cases where catchers get hit where you don't want to get hit.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing how fast baseballs go, yeah,
Ball
no,
two.
I don't. Doesn't
Ball
matter if
two.
doesn't matter if you're wearing a cup.
Yeah. No, Riona, ball 2 becomes ball 4 when it hits at those speeds.
Like on the low end, you're going at like 80 miles an hour.
Yeah, 80 miles an hour straight into the junk.
And it is not. I mean, yeah, it doesn't hurt as bad because they're wearing a cup, but hurting less doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. But I do want to touch on the certain aspects when it comes to the icons, because with some of the icons, what they represent is self-explanatory. With a few others, not as much. Like for the Archmage, oh, that's pretty obvious. It's anything magic related is going to be tied to the Archmage. With the Crusader, the idea with the Crusader is that they are fighting against threats like the Orc King and the like, or whatever the big bad threat is, but only because they're doing so in service to a demon lord. In other words, they're fighting the bad guys, but only to create space so that they can take over later. In other words, they're fighting the bad guys, but only to create space so that they can take over later.
Reverse Doom Guy.
I think I ended up. I suppose. Then you have the Diabolist, who is very self-explanatory. The Dwarf King and the Elf Queen are also self-explanatory. The Emperor, as mentioned, is the head of the Dragon Empire. The Great Gold Worm is obviously the good aligned dragon, and tends to appear indirectly to its followers because it is holding back a gate with worse things on the other side. The High Druid is meant to represent the untamed part of wilderness. The Lich King, self-explanatory. The Orc Lord, also self-explanatory. The Priestess is not meant to represent any one church, but just the religious factions as a whole. And the Prince of Shadows is meant to be the thief among all thieves. Though sometimes you could interpret him as the master of the criminal underworld, your equivalent to Wilson Fisk. If you so choose. And when I ran it, I did mess around with a few, because a long time ago I made a long series of playlists that covered each icon as its theme. Each playlist composed of a sub-playlist of battle and area. Each one of them is at least an hour. So yeah, I spent...
Don, the most suspenseful mafia leader.
But they were built on certain concepts that I wanted to work with. Like, say, the High Druid was known as Holy Terra. And before anyone brings up Warhammer 40K or something like that, the idea was they're essentially the avatar for the untamed wilderness, the part that you are not supposed to go into. And because of that, the appearance of Holy Terra has changed over the ages, because somebody will be born and will assume the mantle at some point and act as the world's representative. Because of that, it's impossible to say what they're going to look like, or even that they're going to be the same race each time. The Hydra. In addition to that, anywhere where there is nature, they might show up. They don't have a lair. They could show up in any untamed forest or wilderness or what have you. Which was my way of saying, don't fuck around in the wilderness too much, or him or one of his associates might get you. And we lost Monarch, and I have to adjust the thing. Give me and we'll hold on a minute.
So in this case, you and I are headless, but well, Riona's no longer horny. The world is doomed, Monk. You've doomed us all.
There. But
good.
Overall, when it comes to 13th Age, I'm glad to see it is making this sort of comeback, because this is the perfect time to bring people into games like this. Even if the fire from the OGL fiasco is cooled down, you still have a lot of people who are growing more and more disillusioned with the current state of D&D. And some are taking the route of, oh, we're just going to go back to the old stuff. I don't think that particular approach is healthy.
Witches in old monopolies have been created and new blood is energized and can flourish.
I think it's far more healthy to explore what other people are doing to fill in that gap, rather than just staying in the bubble. There was a story that Nami had told us not too long ago about how a friend of hers was talking about how they wanted to get into Pathfinder 2nd edition, but then they said, but it seems too complicated, so I'm just going to go back to doing 5th edition. And my immediate response was, then you never tried to begin with. If you actually wanted to jump onto Pathfinder, you would have found a way to do it.
Yep.
No, I think a lot of folks who are in that mindset are just they. It's not about playing a game that's fun for the table, but being part of the crowd.
The tourism, Monk.
Mm-hmm. And I obviously do not hold to that. But stuff like, especially since if I were to go back to going full OSR, for instance, what I get out of it is the same problems that made me not want to do that kind of style of game to begin with. I'm not interested in doing dungeon crawls as if they're survival horror games. I want and need a variety of experiences in my role playing. I mean, hell, we have that with Cloister in the sense that each game that we've run is different. Currently, it's Sword World. When we finish with Sword World, we're not just going to do a brand new campaign of Sword World. We're going to be doing something different that's not even fantasy, because I didn't want to typecast us.
Yep, we're gonna do something else entirely.
Mm-hmm.
I love that approach.
And when we finish with that, we're not going to be dipping into, because the next one after Sword World is going to be something a little bit more science fiction-y. So, in a roundabout way.
In a roundabout way.
But also relevant to both of you, and especially you, Riona. You'll see when the time comes. No spoilers.
I won't tell her. Don't worry.
And when we're done with that, we're going to be tackling a different genre after that.
See, I love Riona too much to spoil her. Well, spoil her on the next season of Cloister.
Mm-hmm.
I'll spoil her other ways.
And that's not even getting into the different genres that we tackle as one shots. At the time we're streaming this, we have done, I'd say, 3 one shots.
4, I think. 4?
Let me see the. Yep, 4.
You did a one shot between the 2 different season or the 2 different modules of Emberwind.
Mm-hmm. That was that was Lone Wolf Fists, which is very much channeling Hokuto no Ken.
Yeah, that's one of Joel's primary inspirations.
Mm-hmm.
Then we did a one shot. We've done some one shot. I think we did a one shot before we started up Sword World, and then we've done a couple in the middle of it.
Yeah. One of the other, and actually this is in the wrong spot. We've technically done 3. The other 2 that we did, one of them was Cloudbreaker Alliance, which is really fucking good.
Absolutely, we love Cloudbreaker around here. But then we did Veil of the Void last Saturday, where I got to prophesy the ending of the module by saying that I fucking hated this place and was going to shove it into a hall of mirrors, and in the end, I fucking did.
Mm-hmm.
Those who don't get the reference, go watch the VOD.
And later this month, we will be tackling superheroes for Cloister.
Yep, with
We Can Be Heroes.
Yes, thank you. I was like, which of the superheroes was
Very cool.
Which that game is very much inspired by City of Heroes, and there was a City of Heroes TTRPG in development, but something happened at Alderac, who was developing it, and all we ever have of it was a quick start. Can't say. I know I've seen some people say, "Well, it was gonna suck anyways." I'm like, we don't know that.
1, we don't know that. 2, how could you say it was going to suck? Maybe it would have been awesome. 3, you sound like a fucking wet rag. go away.
Mhm.
That type of negativity needs to get the fuck out of my life.
Wet rags should be hung out to dry.
Indeed. No, but the to boil it all down, we explore things like the games we know are going to be fantastic, such as 13th Age 2nd Edition, to show that there's so much out there that is fantastic. But we also explore the games we know nothing about to find out if there's even more.
Mm-hmm.
Monk and I are if you've ever seen the picture of what Dunning-Kruger looks like as a graph, there's a amount of experience towards confidence of the subject. And at the very beginning, you have this very high amount of confidence when you know almost nothing about the subject, and that's the Dunning-Kruger effect. But then when you hit a certain part of knowing, the graph goes down and a steep curve nearly hits the bottom, and then as you start approaching actual expert, climbs in confidence, but never hits that high that was the Dunning-Kruger effect. Monk and I are firmly at the bottom of the trough of that graph. We know we're not the biggest, baddest experts out there, and that and because we know that, and we know enough to know that, we also know that there's just so much more we can find.
Mm-hmm.
So we will always be eternally searching for more. That might be
Humility,
considered
a great path to growth.
Only if you're humble about the right things.
And a lot of the people who have joined say Cloister are people who are disillusioned with the ubiquity issue, and I know in your case, Zan, you specifically do not want to see 5e anytime soon.
Not just 5e, but for context, everyone, Monk and I have been playing TTRPGs since very young.
Mm-hmm.
I have been playing since I was 4 years old, and I started on D&D, on D&D 2nd specifically. For the over 30 years since then, most of the games I have played have been D&D, whether I'm the one being a player or a GM, and I eventually became a forever GM. Many of the groups I've ever tried to interact with in my area didn't want to try other games, with the usual excuses we see of, oh, it's just too much hassle to learn a new system, blah-de-blah-de-blah.
Whenever I hear it's hard to learn a new system, I'm always like, how'd you learn the first one?
I mean, I don't point it out because most of these people are my friends, and if they want to deny themselves an experience, even though they know me to be trustworthy and know that I'd never steer them wrong, then it's not an issue of trust at that point, and I know it isn't. It's just an issue of preference, and I'm not gonna try and take the time to change a preference. That would only make them more intractable. Mm-hmm. But I haven't gotten to play all of the systems I've wanted to play as much as I've wanted to play them. I've gotten to play them, and I've gotten to run them, but not nearly, because there's this thing, you get this insatiable itch in the back of your head of going, dude, that one system was so cool, you only got to play like 4 sessions, you need to play more. I'm like, yes, but no one wants to play it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the ubiquity issue of D&D in the West, and I do have to specify in the West, and even more specifically the North America, because it isn't as ubiquitous in Europe. It isn't as ubiquitous in South America. It's nowhere near ubiquitous in Asia.
And in South America, the biggest name isn't D&D, it's Tormenta.
Yep. But because of that issue, that the name is everywhere, and that's what everyone recognizes as the example of a TTRPG.
The Band-Aid problem.
Yeah. It's just I want to play other things, and also because I am someone who has played a lot of other things, I understand that D&D as a system is not great.
And for me, it's a common thing in engineering, design, or whatnot is why, if something clearly isn't working, why keep it? The whole everybody's familiar with the whole definition of insanity thing, and an analogy I often use is that of the dog on a nail. There's an old fable about a dog who keeps howling because where he's sitting on there's an exposed nail that keeps poking him. But he won't move from that spot, even though all the other animals are saying, "Well, just sit somewhere else," and he won't do it. And eventually they start not suggesting that, ignore him, and joke that he's howling because it's not painful enough.
Good old fables.
And I want to make clear, I'm not saying that everybody should abandon 5e or something like that, or everybody should abandon D&D, but I will always argue that people should not be dependent on one game as their one size fits all.
Yeah. The point where you're making more homebrew than game is the point where you need to maybe look for a system that is more suited towards the idea you're trying to execute.
Mm-hmm.
And so with all of these things, especially with Cloister and with Valley, we are trying to show the world, I mean, if we're going to be honest here, that there are so many cool things to play. Go try them out, see if they fit what you're trying to do better, and play them. And especially with this. Second edition 13th Age is taking a game that's already great. We both admit this. It's already great. And making it better. Which I find that to be fantastic. This means that Rob and Jonathan are not sitting and resting on their laurels, and they understand that the game will always have further room for improvement, and that they really, really, really want to tune it so that the game is the absolute possible best they can make it in its current iteration. This little preview document has already really whet my appetite. Piqued my curiosity. I am definitely looking forward to second edition when it finally launches, and I just want to see exactly how far this game can go.
There is one person who I know is most likely going to be looking forward to this and is probably licking their chops at this. Ash Law,
Mm-hmm.
who is the biggest homebrewer of 13th Age you will find, but for me, what is going to be interesting is seeing where the changes come. And thank you, Brian and Sparrow. Hope you enjoy the sub. What is going to be interesting is seeing the differences. There are some classes that I do think deserve a little expansion. There's the two that I think were a little bit undercooked, in my opinion, at least when it comes to the core, were the Paladin and the Ranger. Because a lot of their stuff was built around their talents and was a very in-between kind of class. That's the best way for me to describe the. I mean, I want to make clear they weren't bad. It's just the stuff that, because they're talent focused, there's not a whole lot that they have that is strictly theirs.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's part of the rework. I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
I do hope Monk got a lot of love.
Oh, Monk was in 13 True Ways, so it's not going to be in the core book here. But the 13th Age Monk is fucking awesome. A little bit mad, but it was one of the big inspirations for how we handle Monk for Legend Edition.
Yeah. Hold on, let me open 13 True Ways, actually.
Nice.
So, in 13 True Ways, some of the highlights of the Monk. I'll read the playstyle section.
Mm-hmm.
Monks are great fun for experienced players who like juggling significant decisions within the flow of a moment-by-moment role-playing. You'll make significant decisions when building your character out of interwoven options and fighting round by round using the diverse elements of the monk's attack forms. Some inexperienced players can handle playing a monk, others can't. And they have the
Also, thank you, Sparrow, for gifting Riona a sub.
They have this really interesting form-based combat. And they have some really fun tier talents. There's a lot of detail here that I'm obviously not going into because that's just one, not the scope, and two, that'd be like doing a Valley of the Judge for the monk alone.
But
one of the forms I want to point out, Rising Phoenix.
Well, I think you should note that forms are the successor to Flurry of Blows, but it's on a cycle. Because each form has an opening attack, a flow attack, and a finishing attack.
Yep. And the
so
one I
a
was
bit like 14.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, kind of. For example, the one that I was going to look at, a champion tier form called Rising Phoenix. You get an opening attack called Rising Phoenix Fist. It's a melee attack that hits one enemy. You hit with your jab attack and your strength plus adding your strength mod in fire damage. And even if you miss, if you have a natural even miss, it does 5 ongoing fire damage. So a dot. And then your flow attack is called Becomes the Pillar of Flame. It's another melee attack that does punch and your strength mod and fire damage, and you can roll a disengage check as a free action. If you disengage from all enemies, you gain flight until the end of your next turn. And then the finishing attack, Life Burning Fire Fist, another melee attack, but the target must now be an enemy that is a higher level than you. It does punch plus strength in fire damage, and it has effects for natural evens and odds on a hit and natural evens on a miss. On a hit with evens, you hit and you get a heal using a recovery. On an odd hit, you can roll a save against a save ending effect. And then on a natural even miss, you still do half damage.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple feats for each, but I won't get into that.
Yeah. And that's not getting into the fact that they do have key powers. In fact, a lot of key powers are tied to talents.
Yep.
So there is a bit of mad with the monk, but it isn't nearly as bad as, say, the D&D 3rd edition monk, which is the poster boy for mad.
Yep.
You have the fact that with say the big thing with the ranger is which admittedly has a little bit of a better shake of things, but when a lot of classes have some sort of unique series of abilities, and classes like the paladin and the ranger just have talents, it can feel a little deflating. Now, granted, what you can do with those talents can be interesting, since 13 True Ways introduced a multi-classing system. It's much like with 4th edition's multi-classing, or rather the hybrid class that they did in Player's Handbook 3, it's not really necessary because it's already doing multi-classing in an indirect way. That's part of the reason why I for Legend Edition I had thought about putting in a multi-classing system if somebody wanted to just dip into one of the other jobs. But then I realized, wait, we already have that with how we have magic items work. So I don't need to do that. And with going on the monk, for example, one of the talents you can pick is ninjutsu, which lets you learn a rogue power that's equal to your level or lower. And it grants the key power Yamiuchi. When you hit with your melee attack against an enemy that is also engaged with one of your allies, you can spend a key point to deal sneak attack damage as if you're a rogue of your level. You know, so if you want to just dip into the power sets of other classes, the talent system does kind of allow for that. I just think that there can be more when, you know, fighters have the maneuvers, casters obviously have their spells, and that's not even getting into some of the crazy stuff that can happen with Druid. Druid is one of the widest classes in terms of what you can potentially do with it, because it is built around the idea that you can either double down a particular type of talent, or you can do lesser versions but have a wider variety. That stuff being Animal Companion, self-explanatory; Elemental Caster, also self-explanatory; Shifter, for those who want to do Lycan shit; Terrain Caster, self-explanatory; Warrior Druid, for those who want to be druids who don't want to just be casty boys; and Wild Healers. And something I should note is, the 13th Age has a better understanding of the purpose of healing surges than 5th edition's hit dice. Everybody keeps telling me that hit dice and action surge that the fighter gets is the successor to healing surges in 4th edition. If you honestly claim that, then you don't know how healing surges work, or you never played 4th edition to begin with, or never read the damn book. The purpose of healing surges, and this was specifically stated during the development, was to ease off the healbot problem, where clerics were an outright necessity because that was the most reliable form of healing that you could get. And instead, but the problem is you're still having one person be the dedicated heal bot, and just sitting around waiting for people to get hurt so you can heal them isn't fun. And why do you think I love the combat medic so much in Veil of the Void? I can shoot people and I can heal people at the same time.
Shooting
Very
people allows you
limiting
to
in a
heal
number
people.
of ways.
Well, not only that, shooting people lets me heal people, and healing people lets me do more damage to enemies.
Shooting people heals people, and healing people shoots people.
Mhm.
That's basically how it works.
Yeah, because part of the build was anytime I heal, I get to apply that same amount of healing as damage to a target. But with 13th Age but the idea with healing surges back and forth was so that everybody had some means of healing. Now, granted, the amount that you could use in combat was limited. Normally, you could only use it by using Second Wind, but plenty of features allowed yourself or allies to use a healing surge without spending it. Or burn it in the case of Paladin, because Paladin had more healing surge potential than anyone else, but some of their features let them burn it for certain effects. 13th Age has recoveries. You spend a recovery, roll a certain amount of die, you get that in hit points back. The reason the hit dice in 5th don't do that is the amount of healing you get from it is so minuscule. Like it's a few d6s, or in the case of Second Wind, it's Constitution plus d10. Whoop-de-friggin' do. Maybe if you're trying to do one of those more grounded, low healing kind of affairs, that might work. But if you're trying to build around it being heroic fantasy, that doesn't fly. That's why I said that that's why I opened with the whole greatest hits thing early on, because a lot of the things that 5e does when it tries to channel what came before misses the point.
Mm-hmm.
Even to the point of bringing back the Vancian model when there was standing ovations at conventions when they said that they were getting rid of it. And I've made my position clear on why I don't care for it. It's because of the fact that there's not a narrative justification for it. If you're dealing with low magic, sure, but the only reason it's really there is because it's an artifact of chainmail. And hell, most war games that you find that have magic systems aren't going to use something like the Vancian model.
Mm-hmm.
Just because we brought it up earlier, look at the way magic and look at the way sorcerers and psychers work in fantasy and 40k. They're not really doing the spells per day kind of thing either.
No, they are not.
No, they have other ways to screw you over, but that's not one of them. But overall, I'm glad to see 13th Age coming to the forefront with this second edition. I do suspect that it was originally just going to be a revised, and then they realized how much they had to change, and that's why they said, fuck it, it's second edition.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, if I'm being honest, revised carries the implication that it's not necessary to get, or that it's far more optional when it sounds like that. Especially, or that the changes are significantly less in terms of impact.
When when we've seen here just from this preview document alone that there's going to be significantly more impact than people would likely expect.
Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure Of course, there's also the issue of the rainy day paradox. Holding it for a rainy day even though that day never comes.
Yep.
Because when you give people a limited resource, there is a tendency to be conservative with it. And one thing that I would like to see 13th Age do, and I know this is a long shot, but sometime down the road, put out a long form campaign. Not a singular module, not even a crawl. Although truth be told, I don't think 13th Age would lend itself well to crawls. But
especially since it doesn't use a grid system.
Yeah, a long form module. I think that would be an interesting thing to explore. And for those who use Foundry, I do hope that it reaches the £250,000 goal, which, given where they're at now and how much time they've got, I think they will.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I back to make sure that I get both the player's handbook and the game master's guide. I'm actually glad that they're in 2 books, because some games, when you're introducing a bunch of stuff, having it all in one book is not ideal.
Mm-hmm.
That was the problem I had with Mongoose Traveler 2nd Edition.
Yep.
It was trying to compress all of the Traveler core material into one book, when it's been standard practice for decades to have it in 3. One for the one player book, one GM book, and one book for the 3rd Imperium.
Yep.
And I think that's the reason why some things didn't get as much attention in the original core book, was just because you only have so much space to work with.
Mm.
I do know that in the case of D&D 3rd edition, that's why prestige classes weren't in the player's handbook. But instead you had that one prestige class in the GM's guide. It's because they ran out of room. I would contend that you wouldn't have that problem if you didn't have so many fucking redundant spells.
But, we've already talked about that.
Much like, how many different versions of Soul Arrow does Dark Souls need?
Mm-hmm.
And how many versions of Protection From do you really need?
Just protection from all. That should just be the spell.
Mm-hmm. Brian says 6. Too many. If it's doing the same effect just with a different target, why does it need to be a separate spell list? He says -2. Now you're just throwing numbers at me.
Sometimes.
But that is going
400.
to do... No. But that is going to do it for this particular episode. Zan and I will be back with another Emergency Valley in a few days, covering the quick start of Eldritch Automata.
Yep.
Which is going to be an interesting beast, and those of you who claim to be mech fans, your appearance should be mandatory.
Unless it's too late for you, since we are doing it after other things.
Mm-hmm. And normally I don't do these emergency valleys often, but these were special cases.
Thank you both for having me on. It's always a delight to get time with you both, and was lovely to see your lovely Temple Valley.
Mm-hmm. Now,
Always happy to have you.
That being said, tomorrow we will be doing what I had planned on doing last week, but things got in the way, and that is reconstructing The Mandalorian. That is going to be the focus for Geek Watch.
Mm-hmm.
You have the technology?
Always.
Do I look like Steve Austin to you? Don't answer that.
No, you're not white enough for that.
But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.